Rob, do you have do you have a light? How horrible. Was that her name?
Yeah, how's this look, Ira? Is that window
What was her
burning
name,
not too
Sam?
bad?
Mickey?
Mickey.
And who was the big one? Janet?
Depends on
I don't remember the other
It's hot,
one.
but is it bothering you?
Beast? Beastmaster, yeah.
Tomorrow overheard.
Did you see that? Did you hear Goodman's joke? Yeah, I did see Beastmaster.
Okay,
That was
never mind.
Beastmaster.
Don't talk about Vic
What'd you
like
say?
that.
I didn't like
No Vic
Beastmaster.
Morrow
Wait,
jokes.
so this guy
Okay.
does it too?
There's a raucous atmosphere on this set. I don't like it.
Unlike Jason Miller, who was like a lewd.
Tape is rolling.
No, they're freaking out.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's not it. Oh. It looked like the mixer for the
Oh, let's
coffee.
lose that
Are we about to start this?
McDonald's cup. No, that's set. That's tape.
You lose the cup.
I can't deal.
Tighten up his tires
Sam,
here.
when we made Evil Dead, I wanted to do something that. I should have brought those blood capsules.
Okay. Ready?
Look, what do you want? Look, I'm a busy man. When I first rode down the shore.
Can you give the answers in French so we could send this to Patty?
I'm ready. You rolling?
Ready? Action? Thank you. Sam, what are the origins of
Okay, start.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Sam, what were the origins of your Sam, what were the origins of your low-budget horror movie Evil Dead?
What do you mean by low budget?
Start now.
Okay.
Quick.
Okay.
Sam, how did your low-budget horror film Evil Dead come to be made?
Well, I met Robert Tappert at the University of, no. Okay. Robert Tappert and myself, along with Bruce Campbell, all live in Detroit. And we... Oh, shit.
Start out with an easier question.
Sam, could you describe Evil Dead?
Yes, it is a rock'em sock'em roller coaster ride of screaming horror.
When you set out to make the film, at what point did you say anything goes?
Well, we never really said that. We wrote the screenplay, and then it was pretty intense. A lot of things in the screenplay, I mean, were very intense, and we just went about and filmed them, really.
So that it was your intention from the beginning to make a brutal, savage horror film.
Yes. No, not to make a brutal, savage horror film. We wanted to make Robert Tappert, the producer, and myself, and Bruce Campbell wanted to make a film that would definitely entertain the horror crowd. Because we had sat in on a lot of drive-in movies and a lot of cheap horror theaters in Detroit during shows, and sometimes, most of the time, we would watch films and they didn't deliver enough. That's what we felt. So we wanted to make one that would really knock them with a punch.
There are a lot of filmmakers that work out of the New York, LA mainstream, the regional filmmakers like Romero in Pittsburgh. Renaissance Pictures, your production company, is working out of Detroit. What are the advantages of regional filmmaking?
Well, for us in Detroit, it was certainly possible. I don't know, I can't say easier because it's the only place I've done it, but it was possible for us to raise money out of the city. And possibly it is an advantage to live there because when we went to people knocking on doors and showing them a short version of the film we intended to make for money, they were still struck by the novelty of the thing, not having lived in a film production town. So it could have been a great advantage, the fact that we were asking for this money in a place that they don't make films. We were able to get it, certainly. So I think that living in Detroit had a lot to do with it because of that, and therefore, and how. But also, the unions in Detroit aren't quite as far as I know, I've only made it one non-union picture, but they aren't as intense or powerful, and they won't slash your tires, or they won't do any horrible things or make you act or have men on your sets, because it's just not that strongly organized. So as an independent, it's easier to sneak through their net to make a picture.
To raise the financing for the film, you made a Super 8 pilot for the picture.
Right. Before we made Evil Dead, we made a Super 8 pilot called
Take it from the top.
Okay.
Before we made Evil Dead.
Before we made Evil Dead, we made a Super 8 pilot of the film we intended to make, and that was called Within the Woods. And what I did was took the screenplay for Evil Dead, took a number of the elements from it, and wrote a very short story. We filmed it, and it ran about 30 minutes, and we used it to show the investors exactly what kind of film they'd be buying into, because we had no track record, and they needed some sort of tangible proof that we could in fact make a movie of professional quality.
Yeah, how old were you when you directed the film?
I was Rob, how old was I?
20.
I was 20 when I directed the film.
And the people that worked on the production were all also in their early 20s, right?
I think I could have been 20 or 21, I'm not sure. It was already 2 years ago. But yeah, it could have been 20 or 21. The people who worked on the film, David Goodman, who is also working on this show, strangely enough, and Tim Philo, the man behind the camera there. Tim shot the picture, and David Goodman was the transportation captain, and Robert Tappert, over there, was the producer on the film. They are all in their 40s. No, they're about, on the average, about 26 years old. So it was a very young group of guys getting together and really pitching in everything they could to make the thing.
You shot the picture on location in Tennessee. What were the conditions like?
The conditions in Tennessee for us started out okay, but they became extremely difficult. When we got down to Tennessee, the Tennessee Film Commission, who had been scouting locations for us, told us that day that the cabin we intended to shoot in had dropped through. The location was no longer available. So we stalled, and we were shooting everything else but what took place inside the cabin. And like 90% of the picture takes place in the cabin, so we were really stalling. We finally did find a place. It was an old place in this little valley surrounded by miles of woods near Morristown, Tennessee. And this area had been used as grazing land. In fact, these cows and cattle had knocked down the door of this place, and there was about 6 inches of cow dung. And we had the cameraman and the production assistants and everyone was just shoveling out cow dung for a week, and we ripped out walls, tore out the ceiling, made a studio out of the place, and it worked out very well finally, that locale.
Tell the story of the cabin, the horror story.
The horror story? Well, it's funny you should say that, John, because there is in fact a little known horror story that takes place in the cabin that we shot Evil Dead in. This cabin was built about 100 years ago, and the man who built it died maybe a week after he built the place. And it's located in this valley surrounded by these mountains that have an incredible amount of iron ore in them, so that during thunderstorms, most of the lightning bolts are attracted to this valley. So it's really an incredible thing to see when you're there during a storm. Well, no one lived in this cabin for the next 20 years. And it was probably around 1910 or so when a family of 3 moved into the place. A mother, daughter, and a grandmother. So really 3 generations of women. One night during a thunderstorm, this little girl woke up and she was scared by all the lightning happening around the cabin. So she ran into her mother's room, and pulling back the covers to climb into bed with her, she found that her mother was dead. Well, she was so frightened she ran screaming into her grandmother's room, and somehow that same evening she had died also during the night. And they still don't really know why both of these women would simultaneously die in this place. Well, the little girl ran out into the storm about 4 miles to the nearest farmhouse through this raging thunderstorm out through the night, and they found her screaming, banging on their doors, and they brought her inside and they got the story from her. Well, they took care of her after that, and no one lived in the cabin since. This woman, this older woman, during thunderstorms, after that, I mean this younger woman who is now an older woman, but the little girl, Sally. It's really a scary story if you can get to the end of it. The people at the farmhouse raised this little girl. She had never been the same since, and during thunderstorms, she would oftentimes wander off from this cabin, and they would find her wandering around in the woods. And sometimes, well, here's where we come into the story. The Tennessee Film Commission said, yes, we've got this one cabin that's the cows have knocked down, it's full of dung, but you can use it. But it's haunted. And we said, well, that sounds fun. So we went there. As we were shooting, the fella from this farm came by, and he told us the story of exactly what happened and how his folks had taken in this little girl who is now a very old woman, and that because there had been this thunderstorm the night before, he was looking for this woman because it's possible she had returned to this cabin. And as far as we know, they never found the woman while we were down there shooting, and she could still be roaming those woods around Morristown, Tennessee. The strangest part of the story is that a week after we left the cabin in Tennessee, as reported by the Tennessee Film Commission, a bolt of lightning hit the cabin and it burned to the ground.
In Evil Dead, you achieved a lot